Good evening, everyone. I declare the Ordinary Council meeting of the 27th of May 2025 held in Council Chambers at Level 2, 388 Hay Street, Subiaco, open at 5:33 p.m. Welcome councillors and staff, welcome media, welcome members of the public. It's great to see a full gallery. On behalf of the City of Subiaco, I acknowledge the Whadjuk Noongar people as the traditional custodians of the land we're meeting on this evening, and I recognise their ongoing connection to our land and waterways here in Subiaco. Okay, I'll take attendances now. We have one elected member who will not be joining us this evening. Councillor Kosovich is on approved leave of absence. Councillor Johnston is also on approved leave of absence but will be attending electronically with prior approval. Welcome, Councillor Johnston. And the remaining elected members are present in person, so it's good to see all of you. We've got our Chief Executive Officer and Directors Corporate Services and Business Improvement both here in person, so welcome to you this evening. And the Executive Leadership team's complemented by two acting directors this evening, acting directors, Technical Services and Development Services. So welcome Randy Akama and Adam Cousins. Are there any leave of absence requests for future meetings? Nope. Councillors, any disclosures of interest this evening? Very good. Okay, there were no public questions previously taken on notice, so we will move straight into public question time for this evening. We've got two public questions. We'll start with Susan Morris of Centro Avenue, Subiaco. Ms Morris, if you'd like to ask your question. Okay, it looks like she's not here. We'll move on to the next lot of public questions. Greg Wrighton of Darben Crescent, Subiaco. Two questions, if you will.
To do the agenda briefing forum that was sent out to a certain number of addresses that are going to receive the management statement for 19 Darben Crescent. There was three addresses that I felt should have got these addresses. Unfortunately, I didn't have the full question here. They are our address, 21 Darben Crescent. We live next door to 19 Darben. There was 1 Metters Lane and forget the other one. 3. Sorry, and 3 Atkinson Road. Now, and they live within a couple hundred metres at the most of 19 Darben Crescent. Why weren't these properties listed in the agenda briefing forum? And why are they not to be provided with an approved management plan for 19 Darben Crescent? And what is your advertising strategy for provision of such plans in the immediate residential area of an unhosted STRA?
Thank you. I'll ask the Acting Director to answer that. Mr Cousins.
Sure. Thank you, Mr Wrighton, for the question. The exclusion of 21 Darben Crescent in Condition 3 was an administrative error in the drafting of the condition, and elected members have been made aware of this for tonight's meeting. The recommended condition in relation to 3 Atkinson Road and 1 Metters Lane, the recommended condition seeks only provide the approved management plan to owners and occupiers of adjoining properties, and those properties, number 3 Atkinson and 1 Metters Lane, are not considered to be adjoining, so have not been included.
Thank you. Mr Wrighton, your second question.
If a development application for a maximum of 8 guests unhosted short-term residential accommodation for 19 Darben Crescent is not approved by the City, then can the property continue to operate as a maximum 6 guest unhosted STRA?
Acting Director.
Sure, thank you, and through the Mayor. The short answer is yes, but I'll give some context to that. The City's local planning strategy was endorsed by the West Australian Planning Commission in February 2020, and the strategy includes an action to reduce red tape for landowners to provide short-term accommodation to tourists. This is supported by the local planning scheme number 5, and since LPS 5 was gazetted and became operational in February 2020, short stay dwellings allowing up to 6 guests for short-term accommodation type uses has been exempt from requiring a development approval. So in answer to that question, in the event of this application is not approved, then yes, 19 Darwin Crescent could continue to operate up to 6 guests as short stay dwelling, hosted or unhosted into the future without any regulatory intervention through the Planning and Development Act 2005 and without the need to submit and or comply with the management plan.
Thanks, Mr. Cousins. Okay, well, that was public question time. We'll move on to public statements now. I note we've got a number of public statements in relation to items C1 and C2. For those who haven't made statements before, the way it works here is that you've got 3 minutes to make statements. After 2.5 minutes, you'll get a warning signal. That's not me doing anything. That's the system telling you you've got 30 seconds left. You don't need to stop. You can keep going, but you've got 30 seconds to wrap up. At 3 minutes, your microphone will cut out. And again, that's not me. That's how we program it in accordance with our meeting procedures. So, it's great to see you all here. We're looking forward to the level of engagement we're going to see from you. We'll begin with Susan Morris of Centro Avenue, who wasn't here earlier, and I take it she hasn't arrived in the last couple of minutes. Okay, a statement on item C1 then from Michael Plumley of Redfern Street, Subiaco. Press the button and away you go. You'll see it light up.
There we go. Thank you. Yep, we're good. Okay, I'd like to raise 2 concerns regarding the increased short-term rental occupancy within occupancy limit from 6 to 10 people. Firstly, the planning application requires the provision of a management plan. My concern is that the plan is just that, a plan, and should issues arise regarding excessive noise, parking or overflowing wheelie bins, neighbours cannot expect any immediate action or response. One of the many referenced parties within the plan may later investigate, but by the very nature of short-term rental, the guilty tenant will have long since gone and a new cycle of tenants commenced. So it's no use randomly checking parking or measuring sound levels when the property may later be empty or as a new set of residents. I'd like to pose the following rhetorical question. Will the city be providing a manned 24/7 hotline so that neighbours can access ranger and environmental services at the relevant time? My second point is that Redfern Street is a residential neighbourhood with a close knit community. Short-term rentals, indeed any rentals, are basically businesses running from a residential property. My concern is that by supporting increased number of tenants and therefore increasing the renters' return on investment, a precedent is being set that the town is actively encouraging non-resident investors to purchase it within the area. This application seeks to house 10 people in the Subiaco workers' cottage. How many more can you squeeze into a Subi Central McMansion? This application seeks to degrade the residential area into a business district by stealth. Approving this application encourages investors at the expense of our local community and will exacerbate the housing issues that Perth and cities around the world are currently trying to mitigate. I ask the councillors to support the preservation of our local community and to learn from the mistakes of others. Thank you.
Thank you. The next statement on C1 comes from Mark Stephan of Redfern Street, Subiaco.
Yeah, good evening. I'm a direct neighbour. I'm on 4 Redfern Street, so our family, strongly opposes the this DA. We've, previously outlined all the reasons related to Airbnbs, but this one, I do know that it can continue as an STRA from tomorrow onwards, even if it is rejected. But really, what was concerning was it's actual a DA development approval. So it's the land use change rather than the STRA. That's really a concern. So, the Airbnb started last November. Since then, it's given us some issues, but all the time the issues were when we had large groups, 8 to 10 people. The small groups, they're generally a couple and kids. They're okay generally. It's really once you get to 8, 10 people, the atmosphere and the vibe is completely different. It's big gatherings and it's parties. So that's really and the crunch of tonight is really, do we want more than 6 up to 10? And that's it's an exponential, it's a big difference. It's an enormous difference. And generally, 10 people is not the normal occupancy rate of Redfern Street. It's all family, smaller households. And if you look at the cost of the Airbnb per night, obviously you do need to have the numbers to make it match up. It's pretty expensive, so inherently it will always attract the larger groups. So yeah, my major concern is the format of the decision, a DA, and what I understand, a DA is really a permanent decision, and it's really difficult and probably even maybe impossible for the council to back out of it, compared to a standard just an STRA, which, as mentioned, doesn't have any regulatory approval. And also, one big point is really to make us equal compared to all the other residents of Subi. Now, if any resident Subi can have his neighbour come up as an STRA, well, I would ask to be in the same case. So that we know we may have an STRA, but at least it's going to be a smaller one. So I really push to have a status quo. Let's do nothing, and I think let's not set a precedent. Much easier to be safe and be reasonable.
Thank you. The last statement on C1 comes from Graham Hannington of Redfern Street, Subiaco.
I live at number 10 Redfern Street. I have concerns over the number of guests allowed and the resulting noise. Here's a quote from the management plan. This property is not a party house. Here's an actual guest review on the Airbnb site. My sports team had a wonderful time during our stay. The house had everything we needed and was great for a big group. That's a great advertisement for more sports teams and big groups at the house. This feeds our concerns that it will likely be a party house. My 12-year-old son's bedroom is upstairs behind double glazed windows and blinds. He tells me the noise from the parties at number 6 has kept him awake at night. I have no problem with occasional loud parties, and I'm not saying all guests have loud parties. The issue here is the higher frequency of parties. Guests are here for a good time, not a long time. Here's a quote from the Guest Code of Conduct. No street parking is permitted. All vehicles must be parked in the garage located at the property. In practice, this rule is not being followed. The use of number 6 as an Airbnb for 10 guests is not compatible with the surrounding quiet family neighbourhood of up to 4 occupants per dwelling. Please don't give your approval to this plan.
Thank you. We'll move on to statements on items C2 now. We've got a statement from Kim and Nicola Gray of Metters Lane, Subiaco. A statement on C2.
Press that one. Thank you. I'm reading this for Nicola Gray. She has concerns with the increased parking issues. The owners of 19 Darwin are currently storing a car in their garage, so therefore the guests must park on the street. We've found this to be an issue as renters are parking on the street and adding to the congestion. There has been a noticeable increase in the street noise, with car doors slamming at all times of the night and people yelling and talking loudly. As they are short-term renters, some of them don't respect the neighbourhood, and in Subiaco, all the properties and families living in the area are very close to the road, making this quite disrespectful. We've also noticed large groups renting the properties, and in 2 instances, groups roaming around the area yelling, kicking cans and generally disturbing the peace late into the night. In one particular instance, this went on all night for 2 nights in a row. It's very unsettling when you go out to take your dog for a wee before bed to be confronted with this situation. Resident and ratepayer safety has been compromised. Thank you.
Thank you. The next statement on C2 will be from David Taylor of Darwin Crescent. Mr. Taylor.
Issues have arisen regarding the 4-bedroom short-term rental accommodation at 19 Darwin Crescent, Subiaco. The houses around 19 Darwin have a greater density than the earlier Subiaco development bordering Wembley to the north. The plot ratio exceeds 70%, hence most dwellings have a frontage under 10 metres with no setbacks and a central open courtyard. High-rise apartments surround the enclave, Botanical, Element 27 and Orchard Terrace, etc. Over the past few months, the residents of Darwin have been concerned with the never-ending rotation of tenants at 19 Darwin. Every few days, new occupiers arrive. This raises issues regarding the arrival and departure procedures. Occupiers arrive and depart times vary considerably, sometimes according to late-night aircraft movements. Tenants are usually excited and noisy on their arrival. Also, cleaners and host managers' arrivals and departures on rotation days. Excessive movement. It's usual for people who are on holidays to come and go quite frequently during the day and night, invite others to join them for a late night party, have deliveries of meals at odd hours, accommodate an extended circle of friends and family. This does not coincide with the normal movements and behaviours of residents in this area. Excessive occupancy. The occupancy of houses in Darwin Crescent is around 3 people per household. Most households have 2. The occupancy at 19 Darwin can be 8 people because it's 4-bedroom, or more if they have friends visit, and they do. This adds to the pressure on parking, noise, movements, behaviour, thus impacting the quality of life for residences. Specific issues have occurred, mentioned by Barbara. A movement from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. by a group of youths on the 26th of April, and this is movement throughout the night from 12 o'clock to 4 o'clock. I don't know what they were doing, and I have got ring camera evidence of that. Outside courtyard parties from 12 a.m. on the 13th of April. Visitor occupants bays occupied, sometimes leaving none for remaining residences. Car engines idling unnecessary for long periods of time, especially diesel engines. Quality of life changes. If this short-term rental accommodation is left to blossom unchecked, then more rental areas, dwellings in this area will convert to this very lucrative model. Some precincts are not suitable for this. Subiaco is one of them, and as many high-density areas. Guidelines involving a code of respectful consideration for others for tenants.
Mr. Taylor, I can see you've got about 1.5 points left, so press your button so that we can hear it in here and at home and finish it off, please.
Guidelines for consideration for others to adhere to with consequences, that is, loss of bond. A code of conduct to be prominently displayed at the residence. Short is probably an inevitable outcome for councils to deal with. However, guidelines and rules must be developed so this emerging development of short-term rental accommodation becomes acceptable to the stakeholders involved. This can result in a small percentage of unacceptable tenants not choosing Subiaco as a destination. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got a statement from Phil Dyte of Atkinson Road, Subiaco. Another statement on C2. Mr. Dyte, thank you.
Good evening. There's been an application for the short-term rental in our quiet enclave inhabited mainly by senior people who own their own homes. The use of large properties for such rentals is appropriate where there is space for noise abatement. In our precinct of Darwin Crescent and Atkinson Road, the properties are very closely aligned. Yet when council informed residents next to the property that did not see it affected such a much larger group. And I bring to your attention that the local member in the upper house is only 2 doors from that house, and he wasn't informed either. I'm sure you'll hear about that later. Of course, families are welcome in our area for long-term rent. However, there's an opportunity for large houses to be used as party venues, then problems of noise, uncontrolled behaviour, frequent coming and going, distribution of party drugs and alcohol are probable consequences. Such has already been witnessed at the property where the application has been made even before it was authorised. It's not a detriment to tourism for our suburb, but a recipe for social disruption and reputational damage to Subiaco. This is not what we bought into. We pay high rates for the privilege of living there, even though we often see neglect from the council in performing its responsibilities, and to whom we often ask for support on verges, parking, footpaths, park maintenance, watering. Now the same council wants to further exacerbate the situation by allowing short-term stays and throwing the responsibility of managing the disruption to the police service, not to the managers of the property. We are sure that if you go to the website, you can actually have 11 people in that property, not 6. I checked it yesterday and I could book it in September. Thank you very much for listening.
Greg Wrighton of Darwin Crescent. Another statement on C2.
Living next door to an Airbnb at 19 Darwin Crescent. On Saturday morning, 26th of April at 4 a.m, we were woken as car doors slamming shut and loud voices in the street outside our house at 21 Darwin. At 4:30 a.m, more car doors were slammed and loud conversations heard prior to a car leaving from the parking bay outside 6 Darwin Crescent, which is opposite our home. On Sunday morning, the 27th of April, just after midnight, we were woken again by a large group of people coming back to 19 Darwin. A woman was heard screaming and another woman telling her to come inside. At 3:30 a.m, we were again woken to car doors slamming and loud voices. I then got up at 4 a.m. and saw a black car arriving. Car doors were slammed and 4 males left the car. At 4:15 a.m, another car arrived and parked outside 6 Darwin and 2 males walked into 19 Darwin. At 4:20 a.m, another vehicle arrived outside 19 Darwin. It stopped in the street and the people left the car to enter 19 Darwin. Car doors were slammed and voices heard, and I easily heard next door's heavy steel entrance gate slammed shut against the metal frame. At 4:25 a.m, a male returned to a parked car and set off a car alarm for about 15 seconds whilst unlocking the car. This was heard by a number of residents in the neighbourhood. 5 cars were seen visiting 19 Darwin in the period 3:30 a.m. to 4:30 a.m. By 4:30 a.m, it becomes somewhat terrifying seeing the number of people and cars moving around the area, so I contacted the police and advised them of the activity in the area. The police did not attend and I have a copy of their report. At 4:50 a.m, males were seen wandering around Metters Lane Park adjacent to our home with torch phone lights on and were seen opening their cars and also opening car boots. At about 11 a.m. on the Sunday morning, at least 10 people, and not a maximum of 6 as advertised on Airbnb, were seen walking past our living room windows from next door. The next morning on the 27th of April at 3 a.m, we were again woken to car doors slamming and loud voices. Also heard was next door's steel entrance gate being shut again. At 4 a.m, we heard more loud voices from the footpath outside our bedroom window. At 5:50, again we heard next door's entrance gate banging shut. All of the above incidents were over the past 3 nights occurred under the guise of an Airbnb limited to a maximum of 6 guests. The owners of 6 Darwin have video evidence of the activity over the 3 nights from the 26th to the 28th of April. My wife and I were very upset and pretty tired after 3 nights of broken sleep. It was evident the guests of 19 Darwin had no regard for the peace and tranquility of the area. The home had been rented by long-term renters for all of the 6.5 years we have lived at 21 Darwin. In that time, we have heard very little, if any, noise coming from next door, and the tenants have usually parked their car in their garage, which enters off Meadows Lane. Thank you.
Thank you. A statement from Anne Wrighton of Darwin Crescent.
Thanks. Hello. So currently 19 Darwin has a currently 19 Darwin Crescent has a noise detection device within the building, and the host advised us that the noise on the night of the 27th of April marginally was higher than the agreed levels. There are no detection devices in the street, which is the source of all the noise issues. So the use of a noise detection device within the property was of little use in this instance. Our bedroom is located on the first level of our house, so any noise in the street or on the footpath is easily heard in the dead of night. The agenda briefing forum states STRA's developments are likely to generate less noise compared to a permanently occupied dwelling, but in reality this is not the case. Our amenity has been significantly affected since the commencement of the Airbnb about 3 months ago, from guest noise in the street and cars and Ubers arriving at all hours of the night. We are of the opinion that STRAs are not appropriate in a medium density environment like Subiaco, where 2 and 5 level buildings located on or near road verges reflect and reverberate any noise. The former tenants of 19 Darwin are now living and working in Sydney and have sublet the property as a business to people who are managing as an Airbnb. We have cited the previous tenant's car permanently stored at the rear of the tandem garage at 19 Darwin. Therefore, 1 car bay for 8 guests, as proposed by the DA, is not adequate parking. There are 12 car bays available nearby in the Meadows Lane car park, but this is almost always full by 7:30 in the morning. Subiaco does not have verges for cars to park on. On the last weekend in April, we experienced 3 nights of unacceptable behaviour, which was frightening and definitely not normal in our street. It was a result of the operation of an unhosted short-term stay house. We are of the opinion that management plan for 19 Darwin in reality will not work. Given what we have uncovered about the operation of the Airbnb next door, we do not think it can be effectively managed, as there are many factors that can have adverse impact on the nearby neighbours and local community. We did not buy into this area, unbeknown to us that the city could impose a change of use of housing in the immediate area. We therefore strongly object to the proposed development application at 19 Darwin. Thank you.
Thank you. The final statement on C2 comes from Simon Neal of Darwin Crescent. Mr. Neal.
I would like to object to the scheme amendment regarding the short stay rentals. We've had bad experiences in the past with short stay rentals where we found that they're poorly managed and hard to police. Previously, we've experienced groups of young people renting these short stay rentals in neighbouring properties, which ended up with noisy parties and antisocial behaviour. It is difficult to make the management team aware of the issues of these properties, and even when they're aware, these management teams have not done much to address the issue. This is our past experience. Police also don't take noise complaints seriously. I live on Darwin Crescent, where number 19 has started providing short stay rental, and we've already had bad experiences during weekends due to this property. One incident was where a large group congregated outside our property on multiple occasions during the early morning, making a lot of noise. These incidents were between the hours of 12 a.m. and 4 a.m. Our street is well located, being close to the city centre, and Darben Crescent offers 19 Darben Crescent offers multiple bedrooms, making it an ideal property for young people to rent over a long weekend in order to enjoy the city nightlife. It's inevitable that this short stay rental will cause issues on our street. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. That's the end of public statement time, and there were no petitions or approved deputations this evening. So, councillors, I'll ask you to confirm minutes of previous meetings, being the minutes of the ordinary council meeting of the 29th of April 2025. Do I have a mover and a seconder to accept those minutes? Councillor Jones, thank you, and Councillor White. Given that we've got a mixture of in-person and electronic attendance, we will vote by show of hands on all the items this evening. So I'll put that to the vote now. All those in favour? Great, thank you. Those minutes are accepted unanimously. Okay, announcements by the presiding member. I will just take the opportunity to say a few words about the 2025 National Awards for Planning Excellence, because the City of Subiaco is a finalist in the Climate Change and Resilience category. The city's entry was entitled Empowering Sustainable Development, Insights from Local Planning Policy 1.3. That entry won its category at the Planning Institute of Australia's State Awards late last year, which is why we now find ourselves as nominees for a national award. If you cast your mind back to LPP 1.3, it's all about sustainable development. It introduced sustainability requirements for new single houses, group dwellings, and significant alterations and additions. And it allows proponents who wish to undertake a development to choose from a combination of sustainability measures to satisfy the requirements of the policy. And so through these policy measures, we're helping to deliver the sustainable built form objectives identified in the city's local planning strategy and local planning scheme. So we think it's a pretty good policy, and others in local government think it's pretty good also. We know because they've asked us about it. And the judging panel for the State Awards thought the policy was a great initiative as well. But I digress. The National Awards will be announced at a presentation this Thursday, the 29th of May, as part of PIA's Planning Congress, which is being held in Darwin. In PIA's words, the nominations bring together the best projects, teams and people. They overcome challenges and bring about change, and they shape our communities for the better. So I think it will be a big honour if the city brings home the national prize, but regardless of the outcome this Thursday evening, I think the City of Subiaco's planning team deserves a big congratulations for striving for excellence and innovation in everything they do. So all the best to the planning team in the City of Subiaco, and we'll have something to report one way or another come Thursday evening. Okay, councillors, it is now time to make some decisions. For the benefit of those watching, there's a number of agenda items this evening which are the subject of officer recommendations and which are not the subject of proposed amendments or alternatives, which means that if carried, they'll be carried as per the officer recommendations without variation. The possible en bloc vote I've got in front of me, councillors, would consist of C3, C5, C6, C7, C8, C9, C10, and confidential items 13.1, 13.2, and 13.3. Now, just to explain what is not included in the en bloc vote, C4 was removed as per an earlier request from Councillor Johnston, and items C1 and C2 are both removed from the en bloc vote because Councillor Burns has submitted alternatives for refusal in respect of those two agenda items. So, councillors, are there any remaining items in the en bloc vote that you want to pull from en bloc so that we can debate them this evening? Councillor Johnston.
Yes, could we remove 13.3, please? Confidential item.
Okay, we will debate 13.3 behind closed doors. Are there any remaining items in the en bloc vote, councillors, that you want to see removed? Councillor White.
Yeah, I think it would be useful to talk about C9.
Okay, Councillor Powell. Okay, councillors, are there any further items to remove from the en bloc vote? Okay, so just to confirm, the en bloc vote we've got in front of us now would consist of C5, C6, C7, C8, C10, 13.1 and 13.2. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor O'Connor, thank you, and Councillor De Vries. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour of the en bloc motion? Thank you, councillors. That's carried unanimously, which, as I think I explained a moment ago, for those watching, it means that those agenda items are carried as per the officer recommendations without the need for debate. So we'll now move on to the officer reports, beginning with C1, 6 Redfern Street, Subiaco, a proposed change of use from single house to residential building short-term rental accommodation. We've got the officer recommendation for approval with conditions, and as I mentioned earlier, an alternative motion for refusal submitted by Councillor Burns. Do I have a mover and a seconder for the officer recommendation? Okay, it looks like the item lapses for want of a mover and a seconder, so we also don't need to discuss that amendment or clarification, which we would have needed to do in relation to 21 Darwin Crescent. We'll move straight on to Councillor Burns's alternative for refusal. Councillor Burns, we'll have you moving in a second. In the likely event we have a seconder for your motion. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Jones, thank you. Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Mayor McMullen. At this stage, I'll just, I intend to close, but I'll move straight to hear from anybody else. Thank you.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This property is currently operating as a registered STRA under state regulations which permit them to host up to 6 guests, operating for up to 90 days in any 12-month period. If they obtain a DA, then they will be able to increase the number of guests to 10, and they will be able to operate for 365 days per year. As a condition of the granting of the DA, the owner would agree to a management plan. This would include details of noise monitoring for the property using the minute noise alarms, and also includes a complaint procedure. We've heard from the neighbours that they have serious concerns about the granting of this DA. While there is currently no management plan, there is a guest code of conduct which includes noise, parking and waste management. However, over the period that the STRA has already been operating, the neighbours have reported that this guest code of conduct is not being adhered to. Specifically, the code of conduct states that all parking is to be in the garage off the rear laneway, yet guests' vehicles are regularly parked on the verge and along the street. It specifies that waste bins are to be used in compliance with the city's waste management system, yet bins are often left out for days and waste is not appropriately sorted. Additionally, neighbours have safety and security concerns about the large number of unfamiliar visitors in this quiet suburban street. From this, it's clear to me that the residents consider that the amenity of the neighbourhood has already been adversely impacted by the operation of the STRA. So the question for me is whether the management plan is likely to control these impacts sufficiently to compensate for the 60% increase in permitted occupancy and the quadrupling of the permitted period of operation. This boils down to the practical enforceabilities of any management plan. The big issue is that the transient nature of the visitors means that every booking is a new opportunity for a disturbance. So even if the city could provide an instant response, it would still be playing a great big game of whack-a-mole. Fix it one week and it could easily happen again the next weekend. The only real power that the city has is to ask the department to deregister the STRA, but there are questions about this process. No one knows how long it could take or how likely these requests are to be granted. My conclusion is that a management plan is unlikely to mitigate the existing issues, let alone compensate for the increased level of operation. I believe that if we were to approve this DA, then we will implicitly be saying that this level of disruption to the local amenity is acceptable, and we would therefore be setting a precedent, or at least an expectation, for future DAs. Another concern I have is the potential for the creeping conversion of residential areas into what are effectively commercial. If 6 Redfern is granted the DA, then I gather that the neighbouring properties will have to declare their proximity to an STRA when they wish to sell their homes. I can see that this would increase the likelihood that the new owners would be interested in STRA, and in that way we might see a concentration of STRA in this area, further impacting the local amenity and converting a residential area into what is effectively a commercial one. For this reason, I cannot support a development application.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any elected members who want to speak against the motion? Okay, I'll take any remaining speakers for the motion, which means a refusal. Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Mullen. This has been a complex issue to consider because we have competing ratepayer interests. On the one hand, there's a ratepayer with a residential investment property, so a commercial operation in a residential area. On the other hand, there are ratepayers who are residents in the vicinity who have legitimate concerns and have already been negatively impacted. Residential investment properties play an important role in the provision of housing, and historically that was mostly as rental opportunities under the Residential Tenancy Act. But there's always been the option for people to run bed and breakfasts by sharing their home with others, or to operate a lodging house, backpackers or hostel. I had one in my own street with the relevant approvals. All these options provide important diversity in housing and meet different needs of different people at different times. But the proliferation of short-stay rental accommodation has changed things up, not just here, but around the world. The challenge of short-stay accommodation is in the name. It's short stay. So there's a regular churn of new visitors to the property for short periods of time, and the application before us was for 10 guests. While technically any residents in Subiaco could accommodate that many people, it would be very unusual, except for short periods of time, like relatives coming over and sleeping all over your lounge room floor. In fact, the 2021 census recorded the average number of people per household in Subiaco as 2.1. So this application is asking for an occupation density that's nearly 5 times what's normal. While STRAs usually have a set of rules, the extent to which visitors abide by these is variable, and the care factor of guests cannot be expected to be the same as residents, either owners or long-term rentals, who have to live next to each other and get along on an ongoing basis. Short-term residents don't foster community cohesion. So management of neighbourliness becomes a consideration, and while Council had the option of approving the application with a management plan that aimed to mitigate impacts, it would still fall to neighbours to monitor compliance and report issues, and to Council to try and then get the licence of the STRA revoked or suspended. I feel that neighbours are in the same situation if the item is refused, or the application is refused, and the occupancy rate reverts to the statutory maximum of 6. The property will still operate as an STRA, the onus will still be on the neighbours to report any issues, and on the Council to take whatever actions available to them. But the difference in refusing this application is that the capacity for guests to create disturbance and impact the general residential amenity should, hopefully, be less, simply because of the lower number of people. The owner will still be able to rent the property, either long-term or as an STRA, as we've heard already. So it's not preventing them from carrying out their business, but we're not expanding the provisions beyond the baseline. So I feel that refusing this application is the most appropriate and balanced outcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, any other speakers? Councillor De Vries.
Through you, Presiding Member. This is a question regarding what might happen should we support the alternate tonight and the the owners and the managers decide this is something that they really want to pursue and they want to go forward with taking this to the SAT. And should that happen and the SAT approves, what kind of conditions is it likely that they might put on this? Should that happen? It may not happen, we don't know. We might have a discussion tonight how that might not happen, but you know, how it might not be possible for that to happen. But just in that event, what kind of protection would that likely happen? What would likely happen? Thank you.
Okay, we'll take an answer from the Manager of Planning Services, Anthony Denham.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. So if this was to be refused tonight and if the applicant or the owner took their right up of appeal through the State Administrative Tribunal, obviously there's a process to go through there. If it ended up at a final hearing and SAT made the final decision, it's possible that a management plan may be imposed. It's possible that they may not be satisfied that a management plan is required. It's hard to predict which way the SAT would go. A lot of arguments have to come forward, a lot of evidence be provided. So it's a bit hard to provide a definitive answer.
You're going to speak to it now? Okay. Councillor De Vries.
Yeah, look, we've got some really fantastic speakers tonight who've come out and really explained how they feel. And when the community is speaking strongly with such a degree of clarity, it's really important that we listen. And not only have I given this a fairly deep consideration over the week by hearing tonight's concerns that have been raised over what's happened in the last few months, it does obviously raise some serious concerns. And I'll just go back to when I originally considered this, and I want to sort of go through the process. I thought having a management plan, as robust as it is, would really give protection. And part of me really does still feel to some extent that there is some protection in it. But I haven't sensed that this is just the wrong place for these sorts of developments, this sort of development application. This is a residential area. Like, yes, these management plans are really important, and I'm a bit concerned that they're not already in place, even, you know, that there hasn't been greater oversight of what people are doing in these short-term rental accommodations. And I'd certainly hope, if I was the owner, I wouldn't want to hear that there were, you know, parties going on and you know, who knows what going on. So I think it's kind of raising this whole issue for me, because I did a bit of further thinking and looked at some prospective kind of decisions being made in other councils and where they think these would be more suitable. And look, it's just so obvious to me that it's just, these are residential areas and now we have commercial operations which just are not a fit. You know, I've really weighed the arguments up in my head, really, you know, as you can see, I've got notes, but I've been thinking this through. And if it was me and they were next door to me, how would I feel? You know, I live in Daglish. I'm in the sort of community where it's a residential street. I do get noisy people on a Saturday night. It's a very noisy street because it's near the railway line, so I hear them, but it's only for half an hour and it's over, it's done. Very, very rarely do I have this disruption, but I know it wakes me up. I know what it's like to have that unpredictability. You just don't know. 10 people, it's, you know, and then of course there's no real monitoring of whether it's 10 or whether it becomes 12. I mean, obviously that kind of number to me there's just a sense that it could go to 12. You know, when it's 6, it can go to 10, you know. So I feel like that number is part of the problem. You know, had this application come in with 6 people, for example, I feel quite confident that there wouldn't have been such a strong sense of this is just wrong. And nobody's here is a NIMBY. Let me just say that, you know, nobody here is saying we're not welcoming, you know, short-term rental accommodation. As Councillor O'Connor mentioned, we've always had that in our community. This is not, we welcome business in Subiaco, but these are our homes. So in weighing up, you know, the two issues, you know, I went back to the Planning and Development Act, and in it says, you know, the Planning and Development Act refers to amenity in the context of assessing a development application is whether a proposed use or development would have an adverse effect on the amenity of the locality. And this is the key question for me. It already is having an impact on the amenity. And some of those things are just really quite upsetting to hear, you know, having this constant banging of doors at night. It's just that kind of low level noise disruption that it's, you know, who knows how much it affects one person over another. One person might be like, oh, I don't hear it at all. But if you're that sort of person, and I'm very noise sensitive myself, so I sympathise with people who are. So weighing it up, it's a weighing up, management plan versus, the risk to amenity. It's like a scales. And this week I have been weighing those scales, and I support the alternate, which is a refusal, and I do support the community's concerns. But hopefully moving forward, the owners are watching the debate tonight and have some concerns themselves, and maybe there can just be more regulation. If we've only got 6 people in there, please try to put some more controls in, because we live here. This is our area. These are our homes, and we just want to live in peace, and that's what I heard tonight. So thank you very much for coming tonight.
Thank you. Councillors, any other speakers? Councillor White.
Great. Thank you. I have to say, I confess that I quite like Airbnb. I've used it. I've used it in Subiaco, and it's been quite good. But it does bring hazards, and I think that's the subject of tonight. And it's the intensity of this use that's particularly hazardous, and something I think requires our attention. I think in our position, we're trying to balance the issues of residents, businesses, and visitors. And I like to follow others who and appreciate the fact that people have come tonight to share their views. It's sort of local governance in action, and it's really good to hear the views of people. As I see it, this is about planning, so it's not about anything against the concept of what short-term accommodation is about, but it's certainly about the placement of it. One of the speakers, I think, or more than one of the speakers this evening, talked about the lack of faith, I'll use my words, the lack of faith in a management plan, and it's certainly something that I share in terms of, is it really an instrument that will control what can happen in a place under these circumstances? It seems fairly toothless to me. It has no powers, and last week we learnt that in fact it's not been used as a basis to revoke any conditions, any approvals, and indeed, as has already been mentioned, that this is a development application of this nature is fairly long term. The problem, I think, here is that we're increasing the capacity of a premises to be able to do this. It increases the likelihood of problems, and this leads to the loss of amenity that I think has already been spoken to. So without any meaningful protections, such as a management plan, because I don't think that's got the power that it needs to, we are falling into the hands of a commercial use of increased intensity of premises that shouldn't be in this nature. The capacity of the city to respond to calls, regardless of a management plan or not, and the capacity of the police, as we've already heard, is limited, and they just don't give priorities to things of this when there are other reasons they're being called out for. So I guess I would thank Councillor Burns for putting this alternate forward. I certainly support it, and I think there are planning grounds on which to do that. Thank you.
Any other speakers? Councillor Powell.
Lucky last, perhaps Mayor, perhaps second last. Oh no, that's he will be having the right of reply. So, sorry, apologies, Councillor Johnson. Look, when I first read the officer's report for this item about short stay accommodation, I saw that every criteria under the planning laws was ticked as satisfies or complies, that there was nothing to object to, no valid planning considerations to refuse the application for a change of land use, which would allow a greater number of guests to stay at the property on a nightly basis. But look, then I thought, this is a first. We haven't had this before council before, and surely there is an amenity question here. Amenity for the neighbours and for the street. So look, I started to dig a bit further. I went back to Hansard and the debate in March of last year in the Legislative Assembly, trying to discern the intent of the new legislation covering short stays. And it became pretty clear pretty quickly that this was a somewhat belated response to a rush of new tech platforms for short stays, and that the government had no idea of how many there were, where they were, how they were policed. In other words, a largely regulated industry had sprung up and was flourishing. Hence the new legislation. But at its heart, I think it's pretty limp for a government so strident about how it's addressing housing policy. Basically, what I took from the parliamentary debate is that there is to be a register of short stay properties. In effect, an officer in consumer protection will create a spreadsheet, probably a junior officer, to where seriously naughty property owners will be reported and removed from the register, effectively stopping them from listing. And that there will be the provision of management plans, which have been handballed to local government to assess and ensure compliance. Enforcement of which we've heard tonight is problematical, to say the least. The council isn't there all hours of the day and night monitoring movements and in and out of short stays, nor should that job effectively be foisted on neighbours. So a spreadsheet and a handball, which are expected a pretty lacklustre response from the government, I think, to the growing commercialisation of residential properties and some of the problems that that's brought. In fact, I think it's somewhat paradoxical that at the same time the government is offering short stay owners $10,000 to put the homes back on the rental market. Now, to the officer's report, it says there haven't been any complaints in previous years about short-term rentals. So that leads to the conclusion that amenity has not been affected. But the statements from here from residents and neighbours tonight indicate that there really have been amenity impacts in regard to noise and traffic and street character and parking. And amenity is grounds for refusal. I'm not one who likes handballing decisions, but if the applicants disagree with this refusal, I'm not opposed to it going to SAT, which Councillor Burns has pointed out in his alternative, has already made determinations on amenity. And maybe this is one area where we need a bit more judicial clarity on what amenity means as far as short stays are concerned. Thank you.
Councillor Johnston.
Thank you. Just bear with me while I change up my screen with what I'm looking for. Look, I had a couple of questions based on some of the comments and statements that have come through tonight, if that's okay through you, Mayor. I note that adjoining properties were notified about this application, but not any of the other properties a little bit further away. Yet the amenity or the lack of amenity can be felt by properties further away than just adjoining properties. Will this, if we get future applications for STRAs, will we be seeking comment from neighbours further afield, or are we only ever going to be notifying properties that adjoin?
I'm hesitant to start talking about future applications tonight, Councillor Johnston, but given that this is new territory and we've got another STRA at C2 and we'll inevitably deal with them in future, I think I can give you a bit of latitude. Mr Denham, what's the answer to that?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. So, yeah, we advertise planning applications in accordance with Council's local planning policy on public consultation. So in this case, we advertise to adjoining properties. So there's a diagram that we use as a guide. I guess there's nothing stopping council in the future if they want to look to potentially expand that for particular uses such as short-term rental to provide more guidance. We do that with heritage properties. When there's heritage works being proposed, we generally expand that slightly. So there's definitely scope to do it. We just need a council decision to amend the policy.
Okay, thank you for that, because clearly, external noise travels further than just the immediate adjoining properties. So the impact and the consultation probably needs to be expanded. The other question I have is that we're hearing of complaints, and I recall hearing complaints from about the Darwin Street property a few months ago, and yet I notice, I see on the report that no complaints were recorded within the city of Subiaco. So I'm finding this a little bit, there seems to be a conflict there. So why is it that there is no record of the complaints within the city of Subiaco, and yet people were complaining, I think, back in February.
Yep, thanks. Mr Denham.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. I'm not too sure why. It's potentially because short-stay dwellings up to 6 unrelated people have been exempt in the city of Subiaco for the last 5 years. So when we do receive queries or complaints from residents who may say, oh, this property might be being used for short-term residential accommodation, it's generally exempt and there's nothing that we can do. So in terms of progressing a formal complaint and for us to investigate, that doesn't necessarily come forward. I haven't seen any formal complaints come in for investigation since February. That doesn't mean that haven't necessarily been submitted. But again, if this property has been used as a short stay up to 6 unrelated people and since February, there's nothing the city can do on planning grounds.
I get that, but the complaints, if they're to do with amenity, then that is on planning grounds. And if we're not recording those complaints, then, you know, it can look like there aren't any, but clearly there are a lot. And I notice on the management plan...
Councillor Johnston, is this a further question or are you starting your debate now?
No, this is a question. The management plan doesn't state that there's for any complaint to be sent to the city of Subiaco. Do we have any ability to modify management plans going forward and to have input into those management plans? For example, like that neighbours could submit complaints or should submit complaints also to the city of Subiaco?
Mr Denham.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. So if this application was to be approved and the management plan approved as it's currently worded, the city would have no control to or recourse to make changes to that management plan other than that's listed in the draft conditions in terms of owner details and contact details. So once a planning approval is granted, unless the applicant and or landowner initiate a request to change their application or their approval, that could include management plans, the city cannot do anything. So it'll be valid for forever and a day and the city wouldn't be able to do anything. So if council is of the mind to require further, if they're of the mind to support this application and require further information in the management plan, it needs to be stipulated in the conditions.
Okay, great. And
Councillor Johnston, how many more questions have you got?
That's pretty much it.
Okay, please go ahead.
So just to clarify that, at what point would staff be able to have input in a management plan?
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. So, because the application still hasn't been determined as of yet, council still has the ability, if they were of their mind to support this application, to require further detail in the management plan. In doing so, it would need to give consideration of whether what is being asked for is a relevant planning consideration, noting that there are appeal rights through that.
Okay, look, thank you. Look, thanks for answering some of those questions. Look, to me, this
Councillor Johnson, I take it you're going to enter the debate now and speak to the item?
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Look, we're dealing with specific DAs for short-term residential accommodation, but really I don't think we've considered how STRAs and unhosted short-stay accommodation fits within the broader city of Subiaco as a whole. Which streets, which precincts are suitable and which are not. I know some other jurisdictions have already done this and they are deeming certain zones and areas as being unable to host short-stay accommodation like this. We haven't considered what types of people we want to attract, what types of properties those people are attracted to versus groups we don't want to attract. It's well known that short-term unhosted accommodation to large groups can cause antisocial behaviour and considerable loss of amenity for neighbours and communities. Shire of Bustleton in Dunsborough and Cottesloe are examples that I know of places that are going about restricting areas that short stay accommodation can operate in, and it's a planning matter, it's being zoned that way. Increasing the number of people in unhosted accommodation to 10, up to 10, with up to 4 visitors, can mean you've got 14 people at any one time. There's no ability to monitor the number of people to know if the number of restriction is being adhered to. And, I think saying that people can visit for visitors, they can be visiting at 2 a.m. So you're not going to know if they're staying the night. Residents living and buying a house in a quiet residential street that's zoned that way when they buy their property, they should feel confident that the house next door won't be turned into a commercial unhosted group hotel, essentially. So whilst Redfern Street's already operating as an unhosted short stay accommodation, increasing the number of people through a DA is only going to exacerbate the noise issues already experienced and reduce their amenity. We've heard the noise monitor is unlikely to record issues of noise from gatherings outside, which would be significant. There's no centralised complaints register. People aren't complaining to the City of Subi, so we've got no way of knowing, unless that's put in a management plan going forward, we've got no way of knowing which properties are causing problems. And I also, as Councillor Powell mentioned, and I think the Mayor asked a question last week at the briefing forum, I think there's a number of items in the planning assessment recommendation report which I don't really agree with and I would query. So accommodating one of the objectives, part 2.2, to accommodate a reasonable increase in population and housing stock in appropriate locations, this has been assessed as being satisfied as yes. And yet the proposals for unhosted short-term accommodation, it's not increasing housing stock for people wanting long-term accommodation. And furthermore, it's proposed in a quiet residential street. So the location is not appropriate for short stay, large groups. I think there's a big difference between large group accommodation and small group accommodation, which has been mentioned. I think there's also another one, part 2.3, planning matters, ensuring activity and vibrancy in the city town centre, underpinned by a focus on economic outcomes and business sustainability. And as this is not within the City of Subiaco's activity centre, this was marked as not applicable, but the DA will increase activity on a residential street, which is not the aim. So it doesn't satisfy this objective, and it should really be not applicable. There is also accommodating an increase in population, identifying housing precincts and maintenance of high-level quality housing, choice and diversity. So yes, it satisfies some choice and diversity, but does it really? Once it's zoned STRA, that's it. It can't easily be wound back. So I don't really think it helps that at all, and it certainly doesn't help address housing shortfall. So I think this should also be no, not yes. Basically, I think it's short stay, large group accommodation has a huge number of problems, huge amenity issues, and I don't think they belong in residential streets. And I think we need to be looking at this across the whole city and working out which areas would be suitable, if any, for large groups. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Johnston. I don't think there's anything for me to debate this evening. Councillor Burns, I'll ask you if you'd like to close.
Thank you, Mayor McMullen, and thank you, councillors. If I could take up 20 to 30 seconds of everybody's time and put a smile on your face. Some of this will be stating the obvious, but I'd like you all to know that a lot of work in communications between the people, the councillors that you've heard from has been going on all weekend, well prior to the last week. Furthermore, I'd like to assure you that you are all welcome in this chamber tonight and any other night that we are sitting. Furthermore, I'd like to again state the obvious, we have heard you. Now, it's not really my right to speak collectively, but I just have. On a personal note, I would say this. I would like other property owners considering intensifications similar to this in similar locations to understand, I believe this council has set its sails and is ready for oncoming seas as to regards to matters like this. That's all I've got to say about it. And now I will put it, the Mayor will put it to the vote. I'm sorry. His job, not mine. Thank you very much all for being here. And I would assure you also that the next item is probably going to be a little quicker unless everybody wants to say things again. Thank you.
We can't assume anything about these debates, Councillor Burns, but thank you for that close. I'll put the item to the vote now. All those in favour of the motion? Okay, the motion's carried unanimously, which, just to make it crystal clear, means the application's refused. We'll now move on to C2. Thanks for the applause. C2, 19 Darwin Crescent. We've got the officer. Oh, it was 2, yep. C2's the STRA application for 19 Darwin Crescent, Subiaco, and I did make a mistake earlier foreshadowing that there might be an amendment needed if this were to be moved and seconded. We can talk about that clarification by way of amendment if there's a mover and a seconder, but for the time being, I'll see if there is someone who's willing to move and second the officer recommendation. Otherwise, it will simply lapse like C1. Okay, C2 lapses for want of a mover and a seconder. We'll move straight to Councillor Burns' alternative for refusal. Do I have a seconder for the motion submitted by Councillor Burns?
With your approval, and I believe I'm allowed to, I'd like to offer carriage of the moving the motion to Councillor Jones.
I don't have a problem with that, but I think technically you've got to authorise him to do so in writing. So if you wanted to...
I think I did earlier today. We discussed it and I sent him an indication
okay.
that, he can reject the offer.
Okay, well, look, I'll take on face value that you have put it in writing. Well, I don't want to appear a stickler if you say you've received the consent in writing, Councillor Jones, and Councillor Burns is asking you to speak to the item and move it, then I'm happy for the matter to proceed this way. So we'll have you move. And Councillor De Vries seconding. Okay, it's a team effort. Over to you, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you, Mayor. We've discussed most of these the issues. This is very similar to the previous case, but I will make a few comments. I first heard about this property in February from Greg and Anne Wrighton, who live next door at 21 Darwin Crescent. So while the city might not have received any formal complaints, the neighbours have had concerns about the STRA since it started operating, and these have not diminished over time. The officer's report considers that the STRA is likely to generate less noise than a permanently occupied residential dwelling, but I'm not sure that this would be true in this case. Firstly, I think that the officers are only considering noise generated inside the house, while Mr. Wrighton has pointed out that the compact nature of the dwellings means that the street noise has a much greater impact on them compared to other residential areas in Subiaco. STRA visitors are much more likely to be coming and going, so it's reasonable to expect this to create more street noise, especially at night, and this is exactly what Mr. Wrighton has been reporting. It's clear to me that the residents already feel that the local amenity has been disrupted, and that granting this DA will only exacerbate the situation. They have no confidence that any management plan would be effective, and for that reason, I cannot support the granting of this DA.
Thank you, Councillor De Vries.
Yes, I think we'll be echoing a few points made in the previous discussion, but again, I wish to speak against the officer recommendation for item C2 regarding the proposed change of use from single house to residential building at 19 Darwin Crescent. This application may appear straightforward in planning terms, but what we are actually being asked to consider is much broader than a simple change of land use. We are making a statement about the future character of our neighbourhoods and the balance between residential amenity and commercial activity. Residents have expressed clear and consistent concerns, and although it was the first time I'd heard some of those this evening, it does align with the objections that were received during consultation. And they raise issues that go to the heart of what it means to live in a residential community, not just in Subiaco, but perhaps in wider Perth. And the primary concern is amenity, the livability, comfort and peace of our streets, which is fundamentally impacted by this type of short-term rental operations embedded in residential zones. So again, I have to say the management plan did a pretty good job of outlining procedures for waste, noise and check-ins, but it cannot replace the certainty and stability offered by long-term residential neighbours. The transient nature of short-term accommodation introduces a degree of unpredictability that many residents find distressing. Now, residents have indicated I haven't spoken to them personally, but through what I hear from Councillor Jones, that they would prefer existing arrangements to stay in place and do not believe that a management plan is sufficient protection to increase the intensity of use. We must take residents' concerns seriously. Amenity is not just a tick box exercise, it's the essence of why people choose to live in areas like Subiaco. It's about protecting the right to quiet enjoyment of one's home. Therefore, I cannot support this application. It's not just about planning compliance, it is about setting the tone of the kind of community we want to live in. Thank you.
Thank you. Look, I'll ask the question if there's any speakers against. Otherwise, I'll take speakers for the motion. Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, Mayor McMullen. The comment, just very quickly, the comments I've made about the application for 6 Redfern also apply to 19 Darwin Street. This is another STRA application that seeks to increase the number of occupants beyond the baseline from 6 to 8, 4 times the normal level of occupancy of dwellings in Subiaco. And we've heard very passionately what sort of problems that number of guests is having in terms of amenity, and I really feel for the residents and the disruption they've been experiencing. It must be very, very distressing. Again, a management plan was proposed, but clearly guests are not obeying the rules and it's impacting the neighbourhood, and the complaints process is clearly not very clear and not working very well either. I don't feel that extending the number of guests is an appropriate outcome in this instance, and therefore don't support the officer recommendation and support Councillor Burton's amendment alternative to refuse.
Thank you. Councillors, any other speakers? Councillor Jones, do you wish to close?
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. I think everything's been said that needs to be said, but I would like to commend the residents on being engaged with the process, and Mr. Wrighton especially for bringing this to my attention at an early stage. Thank you.
Very good. I'll call the vote. All those in favour of the motion. Okay, thank you, councillors. The motion's carried unanimously, which, just to confirm, means the development application is refused. So thank you, councillors, for the work that went into those alternatives and the thought that went into this matter at the ABF and in the week since. We can move on from Airbnbs now, or STRAs, and get on to the remainder of the agenda. C3, it was pulled from the en bloc. We've got the officer recommendation and no amendments or alternatives. To those in the gallery leaving, you're welcome to stay for the rest of the night, but if we don't see you, thank you for joining us. Okay, councillors, do I have a mover and a seconder for C3? Councillor Powell, thank you. Councillor De Vries. Councillor Powell.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Look, I'll be fairly brief to this one. This is a climate change response plan. It's really only out for advertising, but I think it's quite important, and I would really like to see our community become engaged with this, so we get their feedback on climate change, because it's such an important matter. And look, I've got to say, one of my prouder moments on council was 5 years ago when the city decided to go carbon neutral, and then we became the first certified carbon neutral council in Western Australia, and we're still very much in a minority. It signalled a commitment on behalf of the City of Subiaco, and tonight we have the draft report on how well we've done and what the future plans are. So 5 years ago, we set a number of targets. Most of them we've met, which I think is a very good achievement, like that certification, the changing of fleet vehicles to EVs, reducing operational greenhouse emissions by up to 45%, I think. Some we haven't quite achieved, reduced energy consumption by 2025, but we were close, only 2% down on what we'd set as a target. And those targets were aspirational, what we hoped to achieve. Now, in this plan, we have a blueprint for the next 5 years with increased targets. When we first became carbon neutral, some of it was on the back of buying carbon credits. Since then, we have made considerable strides in reducing our carbon footprint with the aim of not needing to purchase any more carbon credits, and we're certainly on our way for that. So I'd like to acknowledge the work of staff, and I'd like to see community feedback, as I said, because climate change and how you address it is a concern to all of us. We might be only playing a small part, but every part is valuable. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor De Vries.
Yes, thank you. And I too was on council in 2020, and I think we have been a council that is doing great things in this area. Particularly want to commend staff on their fabulous work, which is ongoing and shows a great commitment to dealing with the impacts of climate change. I too hope the community engage with this public consultation process, because it's the residents will help us to shape the way forward. So this plan represents a comprehensive and responsible approach to the challenges that we face as a local government in the era of climate change. And we know that there are many, and we are winning in this area in Subiaco as much as is possible. We are all acutely aware that climate change is not a distant or abstract threat. It is here now. And we've seen that so recently in New South Wales with the terrible floods, and now the droughts and dust storms in South Australia tell us that this is an Australian problem. The recent pressures on our green canopy with the shothole borer devastation, the impact on biodiversity and public health are already being felt by many. So our community expects us to act. We have a very green conscious community, and this plan gives us a clear and achievable path forward. And that I won't go through and list the achievements that we already can be so proud of. Thank you, Councillor Powell, for doing that. And the ambitious targets that are set in this climate change response plan to reduce total corporate emissions by 50% and so on. They are listed in the climate change response plan. I'd just like to mention another really valuable aspect of the climate change response plan, which is the plan also embraces traditional knowledge from the Noongar people, acknowledging the wisdom and stewardship they bring to environmental management. So this is an opportunity to deepen our partnerships with Aboriginal elders and to embed reconciliation into our sustainability agenda. So again, I want to support this. I know we all do, but I think it's a wonderful opportunity for the community to know more and be part of this process. So I recommend this to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers on C3? Councillor White, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I'm very happy to support this, and I think it's great to see that the city is again sort of staking its claim in climate mitigation and adaptation, and I think it's a great direction to be heading in. I think the staff report and the plan shows that now we're getting into the weeds of how you measure these things, and really how you decide how aspirational you can be about some of these measures. But I think it's great work. Thank you very much to the staff for all their efforts in doing this, and I look forward to the outcomes of the consultations. But thank you.
Very good. Any other speakers? Okay, I think we can ask Councillor Powell if you'd like to close.
No, thank you, Mayor. I think it's all been well said. Thank you.
Very good. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Okay, thank you. The motion's carried unanimously, which at the moment means a vote of 7-0. Okay, we'll move on to C4, the proposal to amend the level of significance for 260 to 262 Churchill Avenue, Subiaco on the Local Heritage Survey.
Councillor Johnston, you've requested this be removed, and we've got the officer recommendation with no amendments or alternatives. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Jones, thank you. And a seconder? Thanks, Councillor White. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mayor. In 2003, this building was included in the city's local heritage survey and was listed as having general level 2 significance. With the advent of local planning policy 3.2, the city adopted new standards for the levels of heritage significance. So it's reasonable for officers to review the properties listed on the local heritage survey to determine whether the significance determined under the old rating system was still justified, or whether it needed to be adjusted. In this case, the recent heritage assessment has concluded that the rating needs to be adjusted to level 3. I feel that it's important that the city's local heritage survey has a consistent set of ratings. This makes it much easier to compare all the properties in the survey with each other. The analogy I'd use is that of a cookbook, where some recipes use imperial units while others use metric. It can become very confusing to use. The obvious solution is to convert all the old recipes so that they all use the same units, and that's what the city is seeking to do here, use a common rating system for all properties. At the moment, this property has a rating from the old system, and failing to upgrade it to the new rating system will leave the local heritage survey in an inconsistent state, thus making it harder to use. I'm reminded of NASA's Mars Climate Orbiter, which crashed into Mars because Lockheed Martin's thruster used imperial units while the rest of the spacecraft used metric. I therefore believe that this is a necessary and fairly straightforward amendment which will keep our local heritage survey fit for purpose.
Thank you. Councillor White.
What he said. Nothing else said.
Any other speakers? Councillor Burns. Councillor Johnston, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I did, but you switched to Councillor Burns, but I couldn't hear anything after that.
Okay, it was something we'll cover later on in casual conversation.
Okay, so do you want me to go ahead? I just had a question, really.
Sure, please ask it.
Is this change of level an increase or a decrease on the register? Through you, Mayor, thank you.
Major Planning Services.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. It's quite difficult to actually provide a definitive answer for that. So the levels have changed over time. So the levels that we use now are best practice levels. So we're speaking to our coordinator of heritage this afternoon just about the equivalency. It's effectively pretty much the same. It's normalising, I guess, the terminology into our current way of doing things. So it's quite difficult to compare apples and oranges because they're assessed and considered differently over the course of time. So it is quite difficult to, I guess, answer that.
Okay, thanks. But you essentially you put them on it. It's not really an increase or a decrease. It's probably the same. It's just terminology going from an old register to a new one.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay, look, great, thanks. That was sort of one of the things I was confused about because I'd sort of read it as an increase in significance and I couldn't see the justification. But thank you for clarifying. No further questions, no comment.
Thanks, Councillor. If there's no more speakers, Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, through you, Mayor McMullen. I just wanted to note that the owner of the property has concerns about the listing. Obviously, it has already been heritage listed since 2003. And so this isn't a new listing that's being proposed. And I guess it's important to recognise and to reiterate, I suppose, that the local heritage survey is not a it is a statutory list in that it's created under legislation, but it doesn't bring with it any protection. The local heritage survey is, as the name says, a survey of places with heritage values of some sort. It's the heritage list itself that brings with it that level of protection. And as a level 3 property with some significance, that doesn't trigger automatic consideration for inclusion in the heritage list without the owner's support. So making this decision won't trigger a next level of conservation necessarily without the owner's consent, obviously. So I don't feel that in approving this, we should be causing the owner any great concern.
Thank you. A question from Councillor De Vries.
Yeah, through you, presiding member. This is a question which we perhaps won't have the answer for, but Councillor O'Connor just raised the concerns that the owner has felt, you know, that there's no need for this, and a lot of the improvements were made in their time when they were in the house. So there is still this sense from me that, are we getting across to the owner clearly enough? Have they been given the right information? Do you know what was said to the owner in response to this? Were they given the same kind of explanation that Councillor O'Connor just gave, which was excellent? How has that been conveyed? Thank you.
Mr. Denham.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor McMullen. I wasn't involved directly with the owner, but I can assure you that our communications with the community are very consistent with local heritage survey, heritage listing, heritage areas. And I think we're probably one of the better ones in WA in terms of local governments in providing education and information to residents to make sure it's understood. It can be a confusing area, so we do try and clarify, and it doesn't always, I guess, get through for whatever reason, because I think people see heritage and they get a bit concerned, but we do our best.
Any final speakers? Councillor Jones, did you want to close? Okay, I will call the vote then on item C4. All those in favour? Thank you, councillors. C4 was carried unanimously with a vote of 8-0. And that leaves item C9, the tender for architect services for the Civic Precinct. We've got the officer recommendation as published. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor White, thank you. Councillor Jones. Councillor White.
Thank you. I asked that we pull this from the en bloc because I think it's an important milestone to have reached, and I think it's something that I'm very happy to support. And I think it's worth recognising where we are and what the implications of this might be. I think we've really gone through a very particularly good process to get here. I think in terms of it's taken some time, first of all. It's been, I can't remember exactly how long, but it's been almost 3 years, I think, since the fire, which has created this situation. But it's been something where, honestly, I think it's been worth taking the time and worth considering the sorts of things that we have in terms of what the future might be. I'm always a bit reluctant to do this because of the time it takes, and I don't want to take too much time at all, but my reluctance is about going through stuff that's already in the report. But I think it's just important to say that we have gone through this two-step process, essentially a competition, in which we've put it out nationally, and we've invited people to come forward. And I think that's been a very rigorous and a very well-managed and very important process. We've kind of had an all-star jury who have assessed this these applications, these bids, bids. And I think, again, I'm always reluctant about this, but I want to do it in this case. The jury has comprised of 4 people, 2 women and 2 men. Emma Williamson, Government Architect of Western Australia, Chair of the jury. Jeffrey London, Emeritus Professor of Architecture at UWA. Shelley Penn, Professor of Architecture at Monash. Mark Jakes, Professor of Architecture at RMIT. Well-credentialed people who can look at this kind of competition and be very objective, and I think we can rely on the best advice in the country on these matters. Secondly, we've had a client advisory group made up of our Mayor and Councillor O'Connor and Councillor Russell, Councillor Jones. And so I think I feel, have in supporting the motion, a lot of faith in the process that we've gone through and where we sit at the moment. And the ability of these people who have won the tender to take this brief forward and to work on it. It's a fair whack of money, but it's going to be managed by milestones and phases and those things which require satisfactory completion. And I think now we have a lot of challenges ahead of us. The challenges are as we engage with the architects and move forward, the first one, of course, being how we engage with the community. I know the staff, there is plans for doing that, and I think there's a great deal of appetite in the community to be engaged in this process. And we need to also talk much more about the scope of the works in terms of its size, its functionality, all of which have overall effects on the final cost of whatever that will be. So, with this ahead, I think it's important just to acknowledge and recognise where we are in the process. I certainly am happy to approve this next step in going forward, recognising the work ahead of us is around these areas. Yeah, thanks to this. Oh, sorry, I should have also said thanks to the staff who have really been, very much engaged in this, and of course the City Lab who provide that facilitation function. But yeah, I think I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Simon. You stole a bit of my thunder there. Nevertheless, as one of the councillors who was sitting on the CAG, I'd like to give a little bit of opinion from how we saw it inside, and we found it, as you said, to be a very rigorous process and really interesting to see how the various teams approached the concept, and I think we're all very happy with the way that it was run internally, and are confident that the winning entry does have the capacity to provide a building which meets the needs and aspirations of Subiaco. I think it is important for people to understand that the choice of Lyons as the architect for the centre doesn't mean that we've actually selected a design which they submitted as part of that competition. They've been chosen because of the abilities that they demonstrated throughout the contest. While their design concept might be used as a starting point, it's quite possible that the final design will bear little resemblance to their entry in the competition. The only input that the city had was the initial general brief plus comments from the three council members on the client advisory group. So at this stage, we still have no real design which we can share with anyone. All we've done is select the people who will work with us to come up with a design. But once the architects have been engaged, the city will then be able to work with them on the concept verification, and that'll help them to get a fuller understanding of the city's needs. Importantly, this is when we will discuss how best to engage with the community, and that's a really important step that we're looking forward to doing. We're committed to providing ample opportunities for people to give their thoughts about the design, because we want this to be a building that serves the entire community. I'm really keen to progress to the stage where we have something that we can share with them, because we're looking forward to their valuable feedback. But firstly, we've got to award this tender, so I encourage elected members to support this motion.
Thank you. Any speakers against the item? We'll take speakers for or against. Councillor Burns.
Thank you, Mayor McMullen. First, I'd like to express that I have the utmost respect and admiration for the jury, the CAG and the consultants. However, after 40 years of involvement with local governments and commercial property with trepidation, I can do nothing other than foresee this project breaching $75 million. Therefore, the motion will not have my support. I don't intend to speak further on it, but it's not something I wanted to say, but it's not something I could also stop myself, so I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much, and again, with the greatest of respect to everybody that's participated.
Councillor de Vries.
So thank you again to all those who gave up many hours of their time on the CAG, and I know that it was considerable sacrifice of your time, and I certainly value your wisdom and insight in that process. So thank you to Councillor Jones, Councillor O'Connor and Mayor McMullen. Also many thanks to staff who also attended the CAG. I'm sure many hours of additional work was put into that, and much appreciated to you for this fabulous work. We were very excited when City Lab came to us and said, yep, we can do it. We can find you an architect. We will do it. And we believed in that, and that belief has certainly paid off. But I do indeed believe that this is the first step of a very important process and will be something our community will want to have a considerable input into. I know our community very well, and I've already spoken to some members in our community who've said there are things that they wish to talk to us with respect to what will happen going forward. So this is a first essential step. If we don't vote on this tonight, we're not going to be going anywhere. And I've sat through so many meetings. I've seen had so many discussions on a previous council this is the second council. We're coming up to the end of my second term. You know, this may not be decided upon unless we decide on it. So it has to go forward. I have faith in the architects being able to deliver. They certainly delivered on the brief that they were given at the time. That may not be the final brief, obviously not, but it was the brief they were given for the competition, purposes of the competition. So this concept design, we know, is not fixed. So that's something to be clear, and that's why the prediction of going to 75 million, we assume, is just not in the ballpark. It's a starting point, this design, a foundation for further development with workshops, with elected members, with the community, public consultation. We have to take this step. So it's a very, very important step that was done with so much hard work, energy and creativity behind it. So it's a great gateway to delivering a civic building that reflects the aspirations of Subiaco, will meet the needs of Subiaco, the changing demographic, the changing population, the changing needs, sustainable, functional, inclusive and grounded in place. It is going to be an important building, one that we know will most likely last for 50 years. So it's going to be a decision that's going to be one of the biggest, I think, that I will make on council if I get to the final decision in my time. So I support the officer recommendation wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you, through you, Mayor McMullen. Look, it was very interesting to be involved in this project. It's been interesting to watch its long gestation as a member of the CAG. That was particularly interesting as well. As others have said, it's been quite a lengthy process and quite complicated with lots of considerations. But we're now at a point where we can confidently engage an architectural team to help us and the community design a new civic building. And also, let's not forget also the surrounding landscape as well in which it sits, to replace what we've lost. And in making that next step, I think it's important that we flag that we have considered a lot of different options in getting to this point. It hasn't been a decision that has been taken lightly to look at rebuilding. It's one that has exercised our minds quite considerably, and a lot of discussion and thought has gone into it. But it is, I believe, the best decision to move forward with, and therefore I will be supporting this motion.
Any other speakers? Councillor Powell.
Second, or perhaps third last this time. Yeah, look, a new civic centre is a pretty big ticket item, and this is another step on the way. It's certainly not the final step, nor do I think it's even going to be the most difficult. I think that is still to come. Look, longer-serving members on the council will remember when a fire put an end to 241 Rockaby. And it was a pretty tough time for staff and elected members that we had to work through it until we ended up here in our rented home. But rented premises over a long period is not an ideal financial outcome. Look, I recall that after the fire, I wanted to see whether the old premises could be refurbished, but council voted by an overwhelming majority, 8-1 I recall, that the old premises were finished and that a new building was needed. And that's how the process goes. There's a majority verdict and we move on. And as we're looking at a new civic centre, it would be short-sighted not to look at the precinct overall. So tonight we're being asked to support the appointment of an architectural team for the design of the new civic centre and the precinct. Now, look, I have no problems with the process that's been used to find an appropriate team. As been described, it's been rigorous, it's been led by the best in the field, eminent architects, there's been councillor input and oversight, independent probity. I think that part of the process has been first class. My discomfort is about community consultation and when it should be. There's a case, I think, that could be argued that we should ask the community what they want in terms of facilities, costs and the like, and then ask the architects to design that. Look, I concede that that could be messy. There'll be so many people who'll have different ideas and needs and wants. A lot will probably focus on the dollar spend and what's realistic and what's not. But sometimes you just have to deal with messy. Equally, there is a valid argument to get the architects to draw up concept plans so that there is something to put for the community, some desperate proposals for them to comment on, and that would be in line with the council's role as a leader in the community. Look, and I think they're both valid arguments. But we do need a decision to move forward. And I'm reluctant to say no to this officer recommendation and potentially lose so much of the work that's been done and really be no further advanced than we were 4 years ago. That would really be hard to do. And look, I asked at the agenda briefing forum last week about the recovery of monies if things don't work out. And we were told that if it didn't work out for either party, or it wasn't what the community wanted, then either side could terminate the contract. So that brings to me some comfort about the process. Either party can opt out or be flexible to change. But I think it's also very important that we acknowledge if we want this project to succeed, we've got to bring the community with us, we've got to be transparent and we've got to listen, because after all, it's their money. Thank you.
Councillor Johnston, we haven't heard from you. Did you want to speak to the item?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Look, I agree with all the comments basically, but particularly Councillor Powell's comments. I think the community consultation piece is critical, and yeah, it's a really critical aspect to this. The budget hasn't really been talked about. Councillor Burns threw a number out there this evening. I think, you know, we've all said, you know, we don't want a Taj Mahal. It's meant to be humble, and yet the price tag needs to reflect that. And I think that's something that bothers me a little bit, is about transparency, community consultation, and bringing the community, finding out what do they want. You know, all sorts of things get thrown out. You know, from having it as a multi-purpose venue for community hire. Is that something community want? I don't think we've sort of worked that out. I don't think the consultation process has been done to work that out. So I think the challenge, there's a lot of work that's been done, and I really appreciate that, and I think it's been great work, but there's still quite a lot to be done in working out what it is that this is to look like and what the community want, and can we deliver that on a budget. That's all. But yes, fully intend supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll enter the debate, and unsurprisingly, I'll speak in favour of the officer recommendation. Councillors, I think it's important at each stage of this long-running process, which has run for almost 3 years now, to remember what we're doing at each stage. And what we're being asked to do tonight is to approve the award of a tender for an architectural team. We're not approving a budget for the project. We're not approving a design for the project. What we are doing is selecting the right architectural team to do the work, which I think we all agree needs to be done at 241 Rockaby Road. And by that I mean something needs to happen, because leaving it as a burnt out shell is clearly not an option. From what I've heard tonight, everyone around the table was satisfied with the process that got us to the proposed award of tender so far. And I would think that should be the case. The CAG has performed magnificently, and I was really pleased to have been a part of it with Councillors Joan and
Jones and Councillor O'Connor. So thank you both for your contributions and the way you've performed your task. As you know, councillors, we've had advice and assistance with the procurement process from an advisor who is a trained architect himself and has given us advice on the procurement aspects, which we otherwise might have got through, but certainly wouldn't have got through as elegantly and as in such a sophisticated way as we have with the assistance of CityLab. And having heard all the glowing mentions of the jury, I can only echo those and further note that we've had quantity surveyor advice and probity oversight as well, which has all made for a very rigorous, very thorough process. And I must say, having sat and observed the presentations by the 3 teams of finalists, this is a very professional team who has demonstrated a real willingness to work with the city, who is the client. Now, what I think I must respond to is concern about Taj Mahals and about price and about transparency. Councillors, we've all been in the same workshops. Every workshop we've sat in, the topic of consultation has come up, and of course it has. And it would be foolish to go into a process like this without planning on consulting with our community. So if you go back through the old council resolutions, it was only last year that we all resolved unanimously that we'd undertake this 2-stage process, and that after we appointed architects, we would program community consultation. And that is where we're at tonight. We're only just at the point of looking to appoint architects. So I urge you to have faith in the process, which I think most, if not all of us, have signed up for some period of time now, and which has been discussed and workshopped at length. And to the community, I'd say there is not going to be a building appearing out of the ground at 241 Rockaby Road before you have been consulted. That is simply not the plan, and we're not building a Taj Mahal for ourselves or anyone else. I had a very sobering comment from the CEO who spoke in terms of the length of time that it's actually going to take for this building to come online. And the harsh reality is that we're very few of us may be building a building for ourselves. It is not about ourselves. It is for the city of Subiaco now and in the future, and for the community. And I should give myself a rap over the knuckles, because it's not even just a building. This is a redevelopment of the whole civic precinct. It does involve obvious new building work, but it will consolidate the much loved public buildings that are already in the precinct. So we'll be consolidating and maximising the use of things like the E.H. Parker Library and the museum and the Fallen Soldiers Memorial. There's a significant landscaping component to this work, as well as the building of a building. So it really is a significant project. Very few elected members who've been a member of this council will have worked on something quite so significant as this, I think. So I think we should all be proud of the work that's happened so far, and really excited about the impact we can make in the next few months that we as a council have together. So I look forward to driving this forward with you all, so that we can keep up the momentum that we've really seen building over the last 2 years and a bit. So I wholeheartedly commend the officer recommendation to you all. Councillor White, if you wanted to close. Okay, I'll call the vote. All those in favour? All those against? Okay, the motion's carried. 7-1. Councillors, that's the end of the publicly open part of the meeting. Well, I mean, there's no elected member motions of which notice was given, and I'm not aware of any urgent business that needs to be brought to this meeting. So I'll therefore ask you if there is a mover and a seconder for a procedural motion to close the meeting to the public. Pursuant to section 5.232C of the Local Government Act. Yeah, well, and there's one item to consider, and that's 13.3. Councillor De Vries, I think you had your hand up, and Councillor O'Connor. This is just the procedural motion to close the meeting, and I'll put that to the vote now. Okay, the procedural motion's carried, and we'll close the meeting. Thank you, media. Okay, I think we're back online now. We're out from behind closed doors, and I can confirm that on 13.3, Council resolved as follows. Firstly, that the Chief Executive Officer gives statewide public notice that the City proposes to commence the major land transaction described in the business plan attached to this report at Attachment 2. And secondly, at the end of the statewide public notice period, the Chief Executive Officer table a report for Council to A, consider any submissions made during the statewide public notice period, and B, decide whether or not to proceed with the major land transaction as proposed, or so that it is not significantly different from what was proposed. Councillors, that's the end of tonight's agenda. Okay, even though they were carried on block, I will need to read out 13.1 and 13.2. Thank you for that. Okay, so the two confidential items that were passed on block earlier were as follows. On 13.1, it was resolved. Firstly, that 35 to 37 Bishop Street, Jolimont, WA is leased to Longreach 33 Proprietary Limited, consistent with the terms contained in this report and otherwise on terms available to the City. And secondly, the Chief Executive Officer is authorised to execute any documents, deeds and agreements necessary to give effect to this resolution. Thank you. And 13.2, Council resolved as follows. That the Chief Executive Officer gives statewide public notice that the City proposes to commence a major land transaction or major trading undertaking described in the business plan attached to this report at Attachment 1. Okay, so having read out the three confidential resolutions for this evening, that brings our meeting to a close. Thank you, councillors, for your work this evening and in the lead up to the meeting. Thank you, staff, for your advice and assistance. I declare the Ordinary Council meeting closed at 7:40 p.m.